was out. So I got in, and then many of you would know this, so I'm not outing myself, but this is all just a precursor so you don't find stuff out later and think, why was he here? I better take my jacket off for this. In 2019, I'll go back a little bit, 2017, we employed a CEO. Long story short, that person was on probation, went through the probation period, and then we had to make a vote at the end of it, whether to continue the person or not. And I'm telling you the short version for the sake of time, but I voted not to continue that person with 6 of my colleagues. Somehow that industrial relations matter, so she was not appointed. She took it to the Industrial Relations Court, and then also it became a matter where the Crime and Corruption Commission came after the 7 of us who voted against her and charged us with fraud. So I was immediately suspended from my job in 2019. I was charged with a criminal offence that carried with it a maximum of 20 years in jail. And for the next 2 years, we went through a legal battle, not knowing whether I would be doing what I'm doing now or doing this behind bars. We were finally in 2021, the 14th of April, we got a phone call from the lawyer on our wedding anniversary saying, oh, good news, they're chucking it out. There's no evidence to support the charge. That was the best anniversary present we got, but we had to wait for 5 days to go to court. And what had been a 2-year process in court, and me not being able to speak to a multitude of people to concoct stories, there was about 30,000 pieces of material and evidence collected, and not one part of that pointed to any of us having anything to answer for. So praise the Lord. So I've got to tell you, that was a relief. I'm not particularly attractive and I snore, so I knew I wasn't going to end up somebody's boyfriend in jail, but you got to make jokes about it. But the thing that was a challenge for me, and that I think sometimes I've read the Bible through from cover to cover numbers of times, as you would expect as someone who's been a pastor, but I've read some of the verses and I think, this guy was dropped on his head as a baby who wrote this or they lived downwind from a marijuana burn-off. Have you read the book of James? If you read it from the Message translation, it says this: consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from every side. Like, what sort of idiot writes that? What a gift. Our family at Christmas time or birthdays, we write a list of the things we want. I've never put tests and challenges on that list. Yes, Sherry, this year, Sherry's my wife's name, Sherry, this year, can you please get me some tests and challenges? Because it's a sheer gift, the Bible tells me. And so, the one thing that I'm really thankful for out of that whole experience was that God has increased my empathy level. I used to have compassion for people that I pastored, but I didn't understand. You don't have to go through everything so that you're able to understand everybody, but you have to look for the gold in the circumstance you went through. I have not prepared to say any of this today, but let's just follow the Holy Spirit for a minute, because some of you need to hear this. Some of you have been traveling a journey that has been hard for you. You've gone through family breakdown. You've gone through maybe mental anguish, mental breakdown yourself. And, in 2018, while the whole investigation was going on, and I have to be careful because there's things I can't still talk about because there's still elements of it going on, but I was in my office and I just had a meltdown. I just broke down. And I was known as the whistling counsellor. I'd walk around the building. I used to put a Superman suit on and walk through the building and just go and talk to the staff. G'day, how are you? I was that guy, the positive guy. But in 2018, I had just run a pastors' get-together at the Limelight Cafe, and through the worship that I was leading on a guitar, I was doing the service for the mayor in his absence. I'm leading and I'm crying. Some of the pastors there thought I was having a moment with the Lord. The staff from council were thinking, who are not yet Christian people, why is he crying while he's singing? Because they don't get the worship, the Spirit is moving. But it wasn't the Spirit moving, I was breaking on the inside. remember going back up to my office, and I said to Ron and Debbie Hill on the way out, can you please come up to my office? I'm not feeling very well. And I just broke down in my office. They prayed with me. I got myself together. They left. But I just broke down again after they left. And I had to ring my wife to come and get me. And I was going through such anxiety, and as it worked out, anxiety and depression. I didn't leave the house for 2 weeks. I actually didn't leave the lounge for 2 weeks other than to go to the doctor. And I got some help. And then you add on to that, a year later, I was charged. I had to go and present Anzac Day. Day before Anzac Day 2019, I received a call. Hello, this is Detective Francis from blah, blah, blah. And can you please surrender yourself for arrest on Friday? I was like, what? We're charging you with fraud. Go to your Anzac Day services tomorrow, but then on Friday, just come and surrender yourself for arrest at the headquarters and we'll process you. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, cool. Your whole world spirals. And if looking back now, I think, what was I even worried about? God was on my side. But in the midst of that, this is what the book of James talks about. Your faith life is forced out in the open. And it shows its true colours. And so the gift in it for me was that when you go through strife in your life and struggles in your life, that some of you, I don't want to play struggle poker here this morning, because some of you have been through stuff that I haven't, and it would be horrific. You've had medical things said over your life. Your family has gone through some horrific things that if you were to stand up and tell us today, we'd all be in tears. But you have to make a decision. And my decision was that I have to look for the gift in it. And so, I remember thinking to myself, what are they going to do when they arrest me? Like, I've watched TV and you see how it happens. So I said to my wife, I better wear good underwear just in case they strip search me, a pair of reserve undies that day, and you just go through the whole process. I went in with my lawyer. It was like TV. They didn't have the music where it goes dun dun when you walk in, but I walked in and they said, 2 officers came in. They said, we're going to record this. You have the right to do the whole deal. And they said, okay, we're going to escort you in an unmarked car down to the Fortitude Valley Police Station where you'll be fingerprinted, DNA sample, photo taken, and then we'll release you on bail. And so I was a politician at the time, so they gave me the little card where you stand there with a number on it and everything, and I smiled. They had to retake it because you're not supposed to smile in those, a bit like a passport photo. You're not supposed to be happy at the time. But I thought, if this gets out, I want people to at least like it. For those who are wondering, no, they did not strip search me, thank goodness. They released me on bail. And so the gift out of that, there's so many gifts out of that. And, now I have an empathy with people. I used to have people in my church come and talk to me. I've escorted people to the police station. I've been with them through the process, but not understood. And I've sat with people who had depression and anxiety and had compassion for them. But now when someone tells me they're going through something, I feel it. And that's the gift, as much as you might think it's not, but that's the gift that allows me to find justice in the injustice of the situation. And for you who are sitting here today, and Holy Spirit, I pray that you would encourage hearts here today. We're here for leadership, but sometimes our leadership is undermined because our soul is broken. We're tripartite beings. We are a spirit. We have a soul, which is our mind, will, and emotions, and we live in a body. But sometimes the filter of everything that we look at in life comes through a broken soul because of the issues we've gone through. So Holy Spirit, I pray with my eyes open right now that you would encourage some hearts here this morning that have gone through soul-destroying things, soul-breaking, soul-damaging circumstances, that you would help them to find the gold, the gift in it, so that they can find justice in the injustice that they've been through. In Jesus' name. So, my situation is unjust. How do you, I've been putting my name down for jobs at different places, and I understand why they don't employ me. I mean, look at me, I'm good. But if you've got 3 people going for a job and they've all got the same qualifications, and most job places will say, have you ever been charged with an offence? Not, are you guilty? Have you ever been charged? And I have to write, I do not understand the question. Right, yes. And then you've got two that say no. Even if we've all got equal qualifications, the risk factor for them will be, oh, I'll pick one of these two. Because that guy, even though I can look into it and find that it was all chucked out, it's on your record. So, you've got to find justice your own way. And people have said to me, oh, will you get compensated? Oh, I don't know. But that's not going to bring justice for me. The thing that brings justice for me is being able to share my story, even like I have this morning, and encourage hearts. Because this is the picture I had in the midst of it all. I had a vision for my life, a goal for my life. And the longer this went on, the further away that target was getting. Like if you look at those circles up the back, the connect, build and equip, I felt like the target was there in my life. I was doing what I felt God had called me to do. And then all of a sudden, that target's getting further and further away and almost out of sight for me. And I was driving along. A friend gave me a job because he said, Steve, I know you haven't done anything wrong. But while I was driving along one day, I was just feeling so down and, trusting the Lord. But sometimes you trust the Lord, but you don't feel good about it. And I got this picture of an arrow in the bow of an archer. And I didn't hear the audible voice of God, but I just got this sense that I was the arrow. And sometimes if you've ever done archery, you can just put the arrow in the bow and go, and it'll just go and drop on the ground. It doesn't go towards the target. It's not until it's pulled back and then released that it goes towards the target. And so, again, I'm encouraging myself in the Lord. Some of you feel like you are so far away from what... You've had prophetic words over your life. And they are not yet fulfilled. And you feel like you've been pulled a long way back. Well, I hope that the word of the Lord to me encourages you, because prophetic words are sometimes not just for a person, they can be for a circumstance. And so in my circumstance, I felt like I was being pulled away. But I'm believing that one day the archer is going to let the arrow go, and it's going to propel me further and faster than I could have ever gone to fulfill the call of God on my life. And so I speak that over you today. Some of you, you're broken. That vision is gone out of sight. But the great thing about God, who is all-powerful, he's all-knowing, he sees it all, he can still see the target. You are not the archer, you are the arrow. And he can see the target, and he is pulling back the bow, and he has the strength to pull it back far enough to be able to get you not only to the target, but beyond the target. So be encouraged in your spirit today. You may not see it, he sees it, and he's in control. So, that's not even here. That was just for whoever felt like that was for you. That was for me. And that's how I think justice will come to your situation and mine. I finished this part of it with this story. I was asked to go and speak at Nexus Church on the north side with Nathan Bean, and he said, can you tell us as much of your story as you can and just encourage us? And so I simply told it a little bit like that. And I asked people to come for prayer at the front if they just want someone to stand as a company of faith and believe for them for good things. I was standing with a lady, she was talking to me, but I was distracted because there was this young girl sobbing, talking to Pastor Nathan. And long story short, I said to him, look, I don't want you to breach any confidentiality, but what's going on there? He goes, mate, this will make you cry. This 12-year-old girl had thought about taking her life, because she used phrases with him that she said I had said on the stage, that she had said in her own mind. Like, my life hasn't worked out the way I thought it would at 12. And she thought of taking her life. And now he's been able to not just pray with her and do the Holy Spirit thing, but also do some of the other things and set her up with somebody to walk the journey with her. That brings justice. And if I had to go through what I had to go through to be able to stand on a stage somewhere and tell a story so that 12-year-old girl stopped thinking about taking her life, then my 4 years of pain is worth it, so a 12-year-old girl can live another 70 years in her destiny. So you've been going through some pain? Perhaps your pain is the seed for unlocking the destiny of others around you. So I've got to write this stuff down. I might be able to use it sometime, other than today. So anyway, Peter, you're doing a great job up the back there. We haven't gone anywhere. So now I've started my own consulting business, and that's what I do in the week. And that means basically I'll do anything for money. Okay, so we go to the next one, Peter. Okay, the first one is attributes of a servant leader. And, we're cooking with gas. We've got 20 minutes to get through these, which is awesome. 10:15 is the first break. Oh, that's good because I only got 3 points. Stretch them out. I didn't really have anything to say in this first part. Okay, I want to give you some practical attributes of what a servant leader or an effective leader has. Now, this is like a smorgasbord at Sizzler when Sizzler used to exist. Go to this smorgasbord, I'll go through them, and you'll pick some of the ones that you think, that relates to me, I'll take that. But all of them may not. But here we go. We'll jump into the first one. So here's some of the attributes of a servant leader. The first one is this. Boom, boom. Eyes that see beyond the present. If you're going to be an effective leader and a leader that's a servant leader, you need to understand that where you are now is not where you're going to finish. You're serving a vision here right now, and some of you have been here 30 years, some of you have been here 3 months, and everywhere in between. But you need to have eyes of faith that see beyond where you are now. For those of you who were in the Coles building down there, or is it owned by Coles? When I was there and I came one Sunday night and preached in that room, and you have been able to follow the vision all the way through and see beyond where you are now. Because I came here and Pastor Ruben walked me through, and I had no clue how freaking unbelievable this place is. I knew it was good, but I went away like, holy moly. But because you're in it and you're used to it, you see the present. But you need to see beyond the present. And that's what a great servant leader does. They are able to, and an effective leader does, they're able to recognise what they're in now, but realise we're not finished yet. There's so much more that God has for us. And so eyes that see beyond the obvious, where you are now. That's the signal to change the thing. Okay. I was talking to Peter before, and he goes, so what do you want to do? You know, some speakers, they have this hand move, and I said, this will be mine. Okay. A creative mouth. That doesn't mean a mouth that makes up lies, but a creative mouth who speaks things into being. So in Genesis chapter 1, if you were to read through it now, if we took the time to read through it, I think I'll say 8, but I'll be wrong. Some theologian will come to me later and correct me, Damien. But these words appear depending on what version of the Bible you're reading. It says, and God said, and it was. Or, and God said, and it was so. And God said, and it was. I think it appears about 8 times. Then in verse 27 it says, and God created man in his image, and in his image he created him. We are the only created being that is created in the image of God. So we are the only ones who, in his image, can also create with our words. The world was not created with God's hands. He spoke the world into being. And if you want to create something in your world, if we're operating in the image of God, we need to create with our words. So an effective servant leader, an effective leader, is someone who has a creative mouth, not a destructive one. So, don't get up on Sunday and say, oh, good Lord, it's Sunday. Got to go to church. Because that's the way you'll walk into the building. You've created that environment around your life. Particularly if you're the pastor, don't do that. I've done that. Oh, good Lord, it's Sunday. I don't even have my sermon yet. That's why I used to go to the church at 4 o'clock in the morning. Oh, you want me to change the slide? But create an environment with your words for growth. Create an environment with your words for not just growth for yourself, but for others. It's not about lying, and it's not about, making up stuff, blab it and grab it stuff. It's actually creating an environment for people to grow and yourself to grow. So think about how you speak. And if you're not sure, ask somebody who will tell you the truth. But don't be upset with them if they tell you the truth and it's not what you think. Because right now, I'm overweight from where I want to be. But I've gradually grown into this. I haven't always been this buff. I was a lot skinnier before. And I can blame COVID and I can blame all the other things. But it's that I'm allergic to food. When I put it in my mouth, I swell up. And there is no cure. But if you ask me, I've put on a few kilos. But if I go and see somebody I haven't seen for a year, and they go, have you been stung by 100 bees? I'm being facetious for effect. But you get what I mean. You stand in front of the mirror every day. When it changes little by little, you don't notice. But if you ask somebody else who's not in your skin, who hasn't noticed the stretching, and you say, am I a positive speaker or a negative speaker? Am I creative with my words or destructive with them? And please tell me honestly. And they actually tell you, perhaps they're right. You don't go, oh, I'm not asking them. They didn't give me the answer I wanted. And go and find someone who will. Ask somebody. Okay, so a creative mouth. A mind that thinks beyond the obvious. You can look up the verses later. For the sake of time, I won't. But we need to understand that there are things that are there, but we need to have a mind that is able to comprehend beyond where we are. So in my situation, I had to release my mind to think beyond, what on earth are you doing? I was talking with these three beautiful ladies beforehand about my mum being in dementia ward. I don't understand why God's doing that. But I've got to have a mind to think beyond the obvious. Because if it were me and I was God, I'd call her home now. Now, don't tell my mum that. No, I'm just kidding. But don't think I'm all for, if someone's not well, let's top them. I'm not into that. But I can't see the purpose in it. But the Bible tells me that God's ways are higher than our ways and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. So sometimes when it's obvious to all and sundry what's going on, we've got to have a mind that clicks into heavenly thinking that says, God, even though I don't understand right now, I trust. And I've got a mind that thinks beyond the obvious. Okay, next one. Hands that produce positive results. I'm going to be intensely practical with this one, and I'm going to bring it down to a job description. If I worked for I'll use a secular employer. If I was to work for a secular employer and he gave me a job description, and of all the things that I was doing on that job description, I was fulfilling 80% of that. You would think, oh, that's pretty good. 80%. You're an 80%er. I'm still negative because I haven't done 100% of what I'm asked. And then if I look at it and I go, I'm achieving 100% of what's on that job description. You could look at me and go, he's a positive person. No, I'm just neutral because that's what I've been asked. It's not until I go 101 when I start to think beyond what's just I've been told to do and I look for something else. That's when I become a positive leader. So my encouragement to you is when Pastor Ruben and Michelle or Damien and Libby, I don't know who hands out the tasks here, God does ultimately. But when you're asked to do something, and I'll go something, I'll just straighten the chairs. My job's only to do that side. Other side's Damien's job. But Damien's tied up down the back. And then you step across and do this, that's when you become a positive leader. You know, when I was working with Pastor Jim Williams, I learnt this the hard way. I ran every department in the church except the senior pastor's role at some time in my tenure with him. Except the women's ministry, I did not run that, but I had to attend every one of those meetings to do Peter's job, to do the chair job, to do the table job, to pack down and vacuum, to do all of those things. And one night I was like, I had 16 nights out in a row and I was getting cranky about it But then I realised I'm actually fulfilling this role, to be a positive leader. Servant leaders are positive leaders when they go above and beyond and produce positive results. The next one. A heart that will lay aside personal agenda to serve God's. I used to love it when people would come to the church and say, I remember I had a guy that came to the church when I was the senior pastor. He'd been there one Sunday and he got me in the foyer out the front at Impact there, and he goes, Pastor, what do you think about Israel? And I said, nice place, not sure if I want to visit. I knew what he was getting at because he had a bent on Israel. And because he'd already talked to a few people, and they'd come to me and go, this guy is really on about Israel. And he had an agenda to, and God bless him, God had called him to stir the church about, the plight of Israel and God's people. And it wasn't that I was dissing him, but he had an agenda that was not the vision of where we were at. And he couldn't lay that aside. And so if you're going to be a great and effective leader in your life, you need to be able to lay aside certain things of your own agenda to serve God's. The hardest thing about being a senior pastor and a senior leader, this would be easy to talk about if Pastor Reuben was not in the room and he was painting. No, I'm just kidding, mate. Is that sometimes you've got to make calls that people don't understand. And he will give an account before God for the decisions that he makes. Don't worry about that. He will. But if there's a vision that comes from God, then sometimes we've got to lay aside the thing that we think it should be to serve what's that. And I think there's a guy, I think his name's Mike Murdoch. He said, what you make happen for others, God will make happen for you. If you can faithfully serve the vision of somebody else, then God might bring the vision that is placed in your heart to fruition, but not until you're willing to lay that down first. Let's go to the next one. Oh, we're doing fine. Fingers that will plug the gaps, not point them out. Fingers that will plug the gaps, not point them out. I remember Pastor Rod Jobe when he was pastoring out at Parklands Church, out at Park Ridge. I remember him saying to me, Steve, in his deep voice, he goes, Steve, I never start a ministry I don't have the people to run. He goes, I've had lots of people tell me I should run this ministry, and I say to them, sure, you do it. And he goes, it's funny how they don't want that ministry anymore. Don't just be a person who stands in the church or in your workplace or in life and just points gaps out with your fingers unless you're willing to use those same fingers to go and plug those gaps. Don't go to the pastors and say, oh, we need more people in kids ministry unless you're in it. Don't say we need more people in the car park unless you're prepared to plug the gap. If you have a physical reason that you can't, then so be it. But don't stir up a hornet's nest of what's needed unless you're willing to actually spray the Mortein on the hornets. Because we've all been given gifts. And you say, well, I can't physically do some of the things that I've identified. Then that's fine. In a place that is opportune, go to the person that needs to hear about it and say, look, I'd love to help. How can I help do that? But don't be a pointer, be a plugger. Next one. A teachable spirit that thrives on both encouragement and correction. How do you go with encouragement? I love it when I receive an encouraging text or someone says, oh, you're doing a good job, or, of all the people I've met, you're the most recent. When they say something encouraging like that, but when someone actually comes up to me and says, Steve, and then corrects me in some way, how do I take that? And I've learned over the years that some of the best meetings I've been in, whether it's over a coffee or even in a board meeting, or that actually caused me a little bit of pain, have done me good. I've got too many examples to share with you, so for the sake of time I won't, but I've learnt to embrace correction. But here's the kicker. I embrace it from people I trust. When I was going through, and still, I run into people in community who avoided me like the plague, and I saw things about me on social media that people had written in my legal matter, and I'd read it, and it didn't bother me. Yes, it hurt a little bit, but I don't really care what that person thinks, because I'm never going to them for advice. I learnt that the voices you listen to are very important. So with the same value that I hold encouragement from those that I went to for advice, I learnt to value correction from those same people, because I knew they had my best interests at heart. One of my best friends is Pastor Russell Harper from Centrepoint Church over at Chermside. And we worked together for a year. He took over the church after my dad left over at the north side of town, and we worked together for 12 months and before I moved down here. But we had this open relationship where we would encourage one another after we'd preached or done something, but we would also critique each other with the thing of making things better. And I have never questioned his motive. And see, he's told me some of the hardest things that I needed to hear, but they are some of the best things. I got him to come down and talk to our staff one day when I was pastoring at Impact Church. And I thought he would tell me all these great things. And he goes, Steve, this is what you need to do. And I'm thinking, yeah, what do we need to do? He goes, no, what you need to do. But he said it with a heart of love. And I embraced it, and it helped. Next one. A brain that brings private perspective and public allegiance. This is important. There's a time and place to bring perspective about things. As a leader, the place is not in public. It's not hiding things. It's about the appropriateness of bringing perspective. Some people will try and railroad others because they don't feel good about themselves, and they think, well, if I can get a posse of support behind me publicly, I can go and do this. That's not called leadership, that's called politics. Because that's how they do it. When I started in council, councillors would come to my door if we were going to vote on something, and they would lobby me. They'd knock on my door and lobby me. And I'd go away. I said, this might be how you operate, but this is not how I operate. I will read the report that is in front of me, and I'll make a decision myself. You don't have to lobby me by saying, if you support me in this, I'll support you in this. That's not how I operate. That's not how my dad taught me to do leadership. That's not how Pastor Jim taught me to do leadership. It was how I would look at the facts in front of me, and then if I needed to go and talk to somebody about it, I would do that in private, and then we would have public allegiance. There are many times in council that a decision did not go my way when we had the private committee meeting. But say there was 13 of us, 12 and the mayor. If the vote went 9-3, I would support that vote even though I voted against it. When I say support it, I wouldn't go out to the media and rail against it, because it was really just, I lost. But privately, I fought. But publicly, I didn't then go out and say, the mayor's an idiot. Who appointed him? Oh, the 300,000 people that voted. Because that's not the way I learnt to do it. I remember we had a board, AGM at church when I was a young fella. And I used to think AGMs were so funny when I was too young to be a member of the church. But we had this lady was going around the church slipping notes under people's doors. And then when she arrived at the AGM, it had just about started, and she came in with about 20 people, and they all sat in one side. And didn't bring private perspective to my dad, who was the pastor at the time, and then publicly tried to railroad the whole meeting. Like, you're looking at me like, oh, as if anybody would do that. Well, they do, but they don't just do it at AGMs, they do it other times. So, private perspective, public allegiance. Next one, we're just about done. Feet that will dare to tread where others won't go. Leaders, servant leaders, will go the extra mile. Something needs doing, everybody else is going home, you're still there. You're stepping places that others won't. The next one, a heart that rejoices in the success of others. Yeah. You need to be able to rejoice when somebody else does well. God's blessing is not limited to this much. He is not the lotto pot and $1 million is available and somebody won the whole million and everybody else misses out. That's not how it works with God. But when somebody else does well and they succeed, rejoice with them, because if you can rejoice with them, again, what you make happen for someone else, God will make happen for you. Next one, someone who can keep a confidence, not use it. I don't need to expand on some of these, but if you can learn the ability, there's things that you may know as a leader that you just have to keep to yourself. Keeping confidence. It's not keeping secrets. I didn't say the secret. The next one, you can go, yep. Someone who is passionate, not precious. Be passionate about what you're involved in, but not precious about it. I remember when I was working with my dad, that was always very good when we had a song list. As a senior pastor, this is back in the early days, he'd let us finish the whole list. So if we'd had the song list, he would just let it run through and then he'd get up and do his stuff afterwards. I went to Bible college and we all had to lead a chapel. I filled out my song list. I was doing the practice beforehand, and the principal of the college at the time, who was Pastor Steve Kennedy, heard the list. And he went next door, I found out afterwards, to his assistant pastor, Tom Conwell, and said, go downstairs and tell Swenno we're not doing that list. I prayed over that list. Don't you know that I prayed over that list? And I had 5 songs. He sent a piece of paper down with 3. This is what we want you to do. But I was passionate about my leading. No, I wasn't. I was precious about it. And so, then I started working with Pastor Jim a year later, and you'd have a song list, and you'll remember this, Carmel, he would get up on the stage. There was one song. He'd get up on the stage, he'd grab the microphone, he'd call his wife Betty up. Betty, come stand with me. Give her a microphone. And I was the drummer sometimes, and he'd say, no drums, broken time, give me the key of F. And then he would just put his hand around Betty and they'd sway from side to side and sing rivers of joy flooding my soul. Rivers of joy I cannot control. Rivers of joy make me so happy. I cannot contain these rivers of joy. And he would sway from side to side. And we had been there from like 7:30 in the morning rehearsing 5 or 6 songs. And then he would go, right now, the preaching of the word. But you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, but not precious. Next one, really quick. Someone who knows and loves themselves. Know who you are. Identify your strengths and your areas of growth, I'll call them, because I'm speaking creatively. Know what your areas of growth are and own them, but also know your strengths and love that about you. You know what? I used to think my leadership was weak because I wasn't a head kicker. But that was what I was told I needed to be. You need to be tougher, Steve. You need to be able to look someone in the face and go, you're out. But I couldn't do that. My strength is encouragement. Putting courage into people, not sucking it out of them. And so, that's what I do. I do that now. But I know that about me. And so it helps me make decisions in my leadership. I love that about me now, whereas before I tried to change it. And then probably the last one, someone who can laugh at themselves. If you can learn to laugh at yourself and not laugh at other people, but if you can just laugh at you, it'll make you so much happier. Last story before we go and have some morning tea. So Pastor Jim, he was about 68 years old when I was serving him, and I was 33 when he finally handed over to me, the year I got crucified. One of my early years there, we just moved into a new building and it extended it. And he said, my boy, I'm going away to minister at Easter. And I want you to run the Easter services, Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday. And I thought, you beauty, this is the first time I've done this while he's away. So I'm up doing the service. The service had gone great. We had people that day come to the front on Resurrection Sunday and throw their cigarettes onto the front. They didn't want to smoke anymore. It was a high service. People had given their life to Christ. And I'm thinking, this is brilliant. And so I come down at the end of the service and I'm just chatting with one of the young fellas. And I talk to him like this, put my foot up on the chair, he's there. And he goes, Pastor Steve, when did you go to the toilet last? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, your fly's been down the whole service. Right? And he goes, every time you would walk up and down the stairs, it would gape. I did what you're doing now. I laughed. Some people would go, I would never go to church again. It became the running joke. So I would lead the praise and worship with a guitar sometimes. And you remember Lee Patterson, Carmel? So Lee would go, your fly's down, while I was leading. And so I'd be playing the guitar, and then suddenly I'd go, and I go, right, why don't we just turn around and say hello to somebody? Oh, you dog. Like, but I just learned to laugh at myself because I'm some of my best material. But if you can learn to laugh at yourself, you're not going to worry about what other people are doing. And the worst form of humour is I hate when you hear comedians that start taking shots at the people in the crowd. I would never pay money to see that. But when you can laugh at you, not be self-abasing, but just laugh at who you are. Like I was earlier about my situation and, wearing a good pair of undies and all that sort of stuff. If you can laugh at yourself, it makes people feel at ease and it makes you a better leader. So we'll finish that there because I think that's the end of the first session. And can we just check? Oh, Peter's been raptured. We've been behind. Peter. Oh, that's gone. Yeah, river. All right, so what's the go, mate? We're heading out.
Cool, guys. We'll have a 20-minute break, so 10:40 we'll come back in. And so on the deck, there'll be morning tea out there.